This morning's guest paints with his fingers, but it's from his heart. Meet him, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Collector's Cafe and Art Gallery on Kings Highway in Myrtle Beach between 76th and 79th Avenues North. We're focused on finger painting, and we're visiting with the founder of the Shaw School and Studio in Durham, North Carolina, Bryan Carey. Good morning, Bryan.
Good morning, Greg.
Thank you so much for coming in early on a Wednesday morning and obviously making the trip down. I know you came down last night from the Triangle. It's great to have you down. And, of course, the Shaw School, a lot going on now.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Absolutely. The Ruth Face and Shaw Foundation has kicked off recently to help highlight finger painting even to a greater degree. But, of course, you kicked off the Shaw School and Studio in, was it 2001?
It was 2001, although I'd been thinking about it for a long, long time. But 2001 seemed to be the right time.
Right. A good year in many ways, a tough year for folks in a lot of ways, obviously all over the country, but a great way to kick off. It says right there when I visited the website even much earlier this morning, fingerpainting.org,
yes,
opening the doors of imagination, opening the doors of imagination. Yes. That's a quote actually from Ruth Face and Shaw.
That is correct. Ruth Face and Shaw, who introduced finger painting to the world in 1931. It was her belief that we all should have the doors of imagination open to us. And she devoted her entire life to that. And that's the work that we continue to do even today.
It was wonderful. A piece in March of 2007 in Our State, the magazine, really did a great job of helping to open the doors to Ruth Face and Shaw. For a lot of folks who didn't know her, I think her birth in, was it 1888?
It was.
Kenansville down there?
In Kenansville, North Carolina, that's correct.
Right.
And so many people didn't know about her, and they didn't know about her life and the contribution that she made to art and to therapy. And that magazine article did a lot and went a long way to opening the eyes of North Carolina and beyond to her work and her life.
Absolutely. Real quick about yourself, Bryan. Are you originally from the area?
I am. I'm from Durham, North Carolina originally.
Right.
And I was, matter of fact, was living in Western North Carolina in 1985 when I had the opportunity to meet John Payne, who was her successor at the time.
Right.
And a year later, he invited me to come back to Durham, and I did, and I apprenticed with him for 7 years.
7 years?
7 years.
We 86 to
93. That's correct.
Right.
And we worked intently together over those years, and it was a memorable time. And I just felt so fortunate to be able to work with him, and with her system, and with his work in psychology.
And he was at that time a psychologist?
That's exactly right. He was, matter of fact, it was a critical juncture in his life. He was making the transition from being a clinical psychologist into retirement. And the timing just seemed to be perfect. And at the time, I was really looking for a calling, a vocation. And I met him, and he told me the story of Ruth Face and Shaw and the history of finger painting and its North Carolina roots. And I said, I want to do this. I want to continue this work. And he said, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And we did. And I've been talking about it ever since. It's
for more than 2 decades now you've been talking about it.
21 years.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I spent the first 7 years working closely with him. We painted together, we taught others, and we eventually created an oral history of his life as a clinician.
I saw that. It took you, it must be 5 months, was it, or even more?
It was every bit of 5 months, maybe a little longer.
Right.
And it was a magical time.
Right.
And we worked closely together. And from there, at his suggestion, he said, what I want you to do now is to remove yourself from the paint and to do a self-study. Devote as many years to the study of yourself and to Ruth Face and Shaw as an historical figure and her work. And I did that up until 2000. And that's the reason the school was founded in 2001. And now we've been doing this for 7 years, working in many different venues and coming to places like Myrtle Beach and being on your show and at this wonderful place.
Traveling all over. And this Collectors Cafe, of course, they're not open in the morning nor for lunch, but for dinner.
Right.
Nightly, and obviously the tremendous crowd they get through here. Being in an art gallery, a little different probably than much of what you and your students, and now you have an apprentice, is that right?
I do. Her name is Jennifer Falchi, and I met her in 2003. And I was thinking driving down here, there are those junctions in life where special things happen.
Right.
And for me, it was 1985 when I met John, 1986 when I accepted the apprenticeship with him.
Right.
For me, again, it was meeting Jennifer in 2003 and her really getting the story of Ruth Faison Shaw and embracing the spirit of her work, especially as involved her work with her children in working artistically and with different craft projects. And for John, it was in the late 50s when he met Ruth Faison Shaw in Butner, North Carolina, as a clinician there, and having the opportunity to work closely with her for a number of years. And then, of course, for her, it was in 1926, that momentous day when little Leonardo went to the bathroom and didn't return. And I know you know a little bit about that.
What a great story. No, we want you to share that with viewers if you're comfortable, and that helps take us back to early days of Ruth Faison Shaw there when somebody there said, come to this Roman villa and help kick off the school.
What an amazing story. First of all, this woman born in 1888, Kenansville, North Carolina, rural area of North Carolina, grows up, becomes a school teacher, travels to Western North Carolina, teaches, then finds herself in Europe, only later to find herself by invitation in Rome, Italy. And it was there that little Leonardo, who was a member of the royal family, was in her school. And he came up to her and said, Miss Shaw, I've cut my finger. And she said, oh, we can do something about that. Here, take this red medicine to the bathroom, wash out the cut, and come right back. He didn't come back, so she went to go find him. And where did she find him? Painting big swirls on the bathroom door with the red iodine. And it was there that she said, now there's a magical idea. And she pursued that over the next 5 years.
He was obviously painting with his fingers.
He was painting with his hands, fingers, and arms.
With his arms as well.
With his arms as well. And she said that finger painting is a misnomer, that she let the children name it because she originally created it for them. And when the children asked, when the children were asked, why did you call it finger painting? They said, well, because we don't paint with brushes. But the point of fact is, she said, well, it's about the movement, and it's about liberating the child to move freely, and through that freedom of movement, to be inspired, to dream while awake, and to have meaningful images appear in the paint. And that's what she did over her lifespan.
Clearly for children then, not only for children now, obviously when John met her at Butner, that's a special place, and as a clinician there, recognizing the need to be able to help folks on potentially on a mental illness side.
That's exactly right, and that was quite a turn in her life, because although she originally created for the children, she always called herself a school teacher. It became of great interest to the field of psychotherapy. Of course, psychotherapy was rather young. We're talking about in the late 20s now. She noticed many, many stories where special things happened with her children in the classroom. One story that's known is that there was a child in her class, and he was painting one day, and all of a sudden the child became very upset, and her, being the attentive teacher, went over and asked the child, what's wrong? And he was very frightened, and he said, that's the monster that visits me in the middle of the night and makes me wet my bed. And she said, oh, we can do something about that. And he said, oh, I don't think so, Miss Shaw. And she said, oh, yes, we can do it together. Let's send the monster back to the bucket. And he did that. He took his arm and he removed the monster from the page, sent it back to the bucket, to the water, and did that for a number of weeks. Several weeks later, there was a parent-teacher conference, and the parents were there, and they were very curious about what had happened with this child over the last few weeks, because they had noticed that his enuresis had stopped. His bedwetting had stopped. And they asked her, and she she was always very polite, although wanting to protect the confidence of the child.
Right, right.
And so, although didn't divulge the experience that the child had because she detected the child was rather embarrassed and modest about that event, she knew then that this is something special.
Absolutely. What a great example. And as you explained there, he continued to paint the monster daily.
Yes.
Or on a regular basis, and then would wipe it clean by the end of the class, let's say.
That's exactly right.
That's tremendous.
And it was through that, the catharsis, the cleansing, paint to bucket, that he was able to rid himself of the monster that did visit him in the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
And then eventually, of course, psychotherapy learned about this, especially Carl Menninger. And it was there that she was invited in the 40s to go to the Menninger Foundation, Topeka, Kansas, and work with his patients and the students that were there. That
is tremendous. Well, I think if folks take the time and track down that March issue of the March 2007 issue of Our State, they'll see that great point that you highlight, that so oftentimes as folks begin this on a therapeutic sense or on a mental illness sense, they're going to begin with nothing necessarily in mind and begin painting away and oftentimes turn into beautiful pieces much like this, just with nothing planned in their imagination.
Well, thank you. And that's actually what makes, I think, her technique so special, is that what we paint is that which comes from within. And by virtue of that, there's a special relationship that happens between the painter and the painting. A relationship, just as in life. And so much of her teaching and principles were in life. This particular painting, for instance, I did not set out to paint this still life, although I was very interested in still lifes at the time. I've been interested in the history of art since starting my work with John. And so I'm always looking for ways to re-express and express what I experience out in the world. This is one of those examples.
This is a piece May of 2006, and that would take you over the course of a day, a week, or just an hour or so.
Ruth Shaw, whenever she was asked, how long does it take you to paint a painting, she would always say, well, ever how many years she had been practicing the medium, plus 15 minutes. Of course, it appears to be very simple at first glance. It's a very specific technique, a very specific method, and that's why we have the school, because what we have found is finger painting thrived as a medium. Everyone knows what finger painting is. Most everyone under the age of 75, they've had the experience, but they don't know the history, they don't know the method. Her method was very specific. Her technique, very specific, and that's what we do. We work with individuals and groups in many different settings, whether it be in mental health, or whether it be in schools with cultural enhancement programs, or whether it be with professional organizations for team building. We work with different groups.
I saw that at fingerpainting.org. There's a great list of course, some of the events and services. I think I saw a law firm on there that you were the DeWitt Law Office in August.
That's right.
So experiencing lots of different venues for explaining the both technique as well as the history there. And fingerpainting.org is worth making the trip to check out the website, because it's got a lot of great examples of not only your own but also Jennifer Falchi's there.
That's correct, and we have some of her work.
You brought one of hers,
and some others.
Look at
this is
that.
Jennifer Falchi's, and this was on the heels of a visit that she made last year to your state, the Palmetto State, and it was here that she was inspired from the environment in which she experienced to paint these trees. Now, she had never actually painted these trees before, and although they appeared, and once they appeared, coming from her subjective experience, she chose to keep them. Now, what's interesting about this is you also see 3 here. You see the number 3, and here we have mother, daughter, and daughter. And she recognizes that those things don't happen by accident. They happen because they're meaningful experiences in life. Her visit to the Palmetto State, her family, and a beautiful painting.
Absolutely. And now this is principally, of course, most of your pieces or her pieces, are they done there in your school and studio?
Primarily at 305 East Chapel Hill Street in Durham,
Right.
although we work off location all the time with different groups.
I was asking only in that, did you watch her create this piece, or do you normally, as we talked about, that idea that so oftentimes there's no idea of what's going to happen, what's going to be put from finger or arm or elbow to canvas there.
And what Ruchal said was there was the happy accident.
Happy accident.
The happy accident, and forever she had these principles that related not only to education, but to therapy, but to life, most importantly. And John said that finger painting was a laboratory for life. And it's there that we bring all of life to our painting experience. So, yes.
Yes. Well, the question there, I mean, how many body parts are used for a piece like that? Can
Probably,
you tell?
I would say, well, my guess would be fingers, arms, and hands.
And when you say arms and hands, let's say what part of the arm are we talking about?
Very good question. Well, we'd start with the elbow. Oftentimes we use large sweeping motions. What John would say, we're warming up the larger muscles of the body. From there, once the body is warm and is ready, flexible to paint, then we work from the elbow down the arm to the wrist, or the palm of the hand, or the knuckles. And even experimenting with the fingers and the fingernails. And that's what is so special, is that you have an opportunity to become acquainted with your body as an instrument for creativity. And I think that makes it special. I also think it makes it special because you are literally in the paint.
Yes.
You are immersed in the paint. You and your mind are right there in the paint.
That's
direct
fascinating.
contact. No degrees of separation.
Listen to that, Brian. A lot of fancy words, but they come out very well, and they're well understood. Just hearing you say that, of course, there was also a time of, forgive me for asking, there was 6 or 7 years where you were studying yoga. Is that right?
That is correct. And John,
John Thomas Paine opened that door for you.
He did.
Sounds like.
He did. And what was so important to that segment is that he believed that self-study was important.
Right.
He started studying psychology when you could read everything that had ever been written in the field of psychology.
Right.
And he said, if Freud could self-analyze, well, why can't we? So it was important for every individual to take a very good look at themselves.
Right.
Not in a judgmental way, not with blame, but with openness to learn about themselves. And this medium, of course, is a way to do that, and yoga, too, is a wonderful way to do that.
Right.
Yoga, the primary historical figure associated with yoga that I've learned is Patanjali. And Patanjali defined yoga, yogash chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga is mastery of mind. And I believe through mastery of mind we achieve mastery of life.
Right.
And
Great
we can
words.
do that through this meeting.
If a viewer needs to get off to work now or get family off to school or
Yes.
otherwise, Brian, is it fingerpainting.org is the best way to reach you all? Is there a phone number?
Yes, 919-475-1355.
Okay.
My email address is Bryan Carey, BRYANCAREY,
Right.
at fingerpainting.org.
Great. Bryan Carey at fingerpainting.org. And as you said, 919-475.
1355.
Okay, great. And of course, they can call and find out when you're going to be around or when you're not out of the office, not out of the school and studio there, either giving seminars or giving exhibits or workshops. So it's very important to make sure that y'all are around and they can come by and see the magnificent school and studio there on East Chapel Hill Street. We've got about 5 minutes. I'm sorry to say time is flying, so we want to get into time is absolutely moving fast here. I want to make sure we highlight some other pieces.
Wonderful.
These are, of course, two adults, yourself and Jennifer there. You've also got some finger painting of 2 children here.
Yes, this is a 9-year-old. This is Olivia. And this is Jennifer's eldest daughter. And she entitled this painting Storm. And oftentimes, and Jennifer's been instrumental in this part, we encourage our students, all ages, to write a story. And this is true to Ruchal's tradition. So we ask her, well, tell us about the storm if you feel comfortable. And she said, well, there's nothing specific about that storm that I can report, except I had a dream about that storm.
Right.
I said, you did? And she said, well, yes. In a very matter of fact, of course I had a dream about this storm. And I said, wow. I said, well, did you have any emotions associated with that storm? Was it a scary storm? No, it was just simply a storm.
Right.
So I thought that was wonderful.
That is.
We also have another painting here, and this is by her younger
boy.
sister, a 5-year-old. And actually, I don't think there's much more I can say about this other than the title. The title of this painting is Mommy.
All right.
And here we have Mommy in the very center of the painting.
Yes.
And this child is a delightful child, full of life, creativity, and imagination.
And this child is what age, Bryan?
This at the age of painting was age 5. She's now 6.
Okay.
And this is Mommy, and in a 5-year-old's mind, and in her life at the very center. And this painting, interestingly enough, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring it is because people are drawn to this painting, and I think it's a very powerful painting.
It is. But to see some of the pieces there at fingerpainting.org, some amazing examples of both of yours and of Jennifer's there, but some worth making the effort to check out the website in and of itself. How about examples of Ruth Faison Shaw's work? Are those currently...
That's a very good question. There's an organization called the Ruth Faison Shaw Foundation, which you're probably very familiar with.
Absolutely.
Judge Robinson Everett has been a huge benefactor in that cause. And it's been wonderful to work with him as a cousin of hers and of someone who's very passionate about her and her work, and actually visited her in her studio in New York, as I understand, as I recall.
I've heard that, yes.
And we've been working together for a number of years. And as a matter of fact, we share birthdays.
Is that right?
March 18th.
Yes.
We share birthdays.
A
few years. But as a matter of fact, I had a chance to have lunch with him last week, and the board of that foundation. And they are working diligently at protecting and preserving the collection.
I saw in that piece in Our State, in the March 2007 issue of Our State, if folks wanted to learn more about the foundation or support the foundation and the cause of finger painting and obviously opening the doors of imagination, they can call the 919-382-2800 number, the Everett and Everett Law Firm there. But at the same time, visiting your studio or calling the studio, obviously, to learn more. Your goal is to get the word out. Is that right?
That is, we want to go everywhere, and we want to speak to everyone, and that's what we're devoting the next 7 years to.
Great.
Is to getting the word out. Here's a very important historical figure. Let's recognize her and her work, and let's finger paint together. Let's roll up our sleeves, paint, and have fun with each other.
The Shavian technique. The Shavian technique, and that is her technique.
That is her specific technique. And again, I just think it was a tragedy, and that's what attracted me to this so much, is that I knew about finger painting. I finger painted when I was younger, but I didn't recognize how rich the history is, and I didn't realize how valuable it was to the individual or to a group when they're painting just by themselves or with each other.
And that's what I was wondering, are the 5- and 9-year-olds, through your workshops and through seminars or other exhibits, taking it in and understanding this is more than just finger to canvas? Are they recognizing that she may not have started planning a piece that would detail her mother there, but instead, is this principally her fingers?
Very good question, and I will say this, and she says this in the introduction to her first book, Finger Painting, A Perfect Medium for Self-Expression. She wrote her first book for adults in charge, be they parents or teachers, because she said, you know what, there's very little we have to teach children about finger painting that they don't already know. She said they've been making mud pies since the beginning of time. All I did was add the color. So what she wanted to do is to ensure that the big people were able to step away and be a supportive presence rather than interference. And that's where the technique is so important, and not only for children but people of all ages and abilities.
Other folks following Ruth Faison Shaw around the world? Are there other people that have picked up the mission, much like yourself, Bryan, and doing anything similar to help further the Shavian technique?
I know of no one.
Is that right?
I know of no one. And that was another thing that captured my imagination, because when I talked to John as their successor, I said, well, who's doing this? And he said, well, I am. I said, well, who else? And he said, no one else. Would you be interested? And I was like, what an honor to be able to work with you and learn about this and extend it into the future.
Sure. For our other viewers, of course, in Robinson and Scotland County, they're aware of Duplin County. They think of Kenansville when they're traveling down, as you did yesterday, I-40 yesterday to come in for this morning. You conjure images as you're seeing signs for Kenansville off of I-40 there? Images of Ruth Faison Shaw, do you think of her?
Well, you know, absolutely. We were down in Faison, North Carolina earlier this year.
Right.
As we traveled quite a bit, talking with individual groups and groups at large. And just traveling through there, thinking about there's her home place,
right,
and how she spent the first 18 years of her life there,
right,
before leaving. And although she never really returned until she returned to Fayetteville in the late 60s, and of course she passed away in 1969.
Right.
It's a place that strikes a chord in my heart.
I bet it does. Bryan, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Sorry we've run out of time.
Oh, no, thank you for having me.
Keep the mission alive.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Bryan Carey, the founder of the Shaw School in the studio. Coming up next. Can you imagine this native of Duplin County of North Carolina there in a foreign country in Rome, already recognizing the sincerity of her role as a teacher and as an advisor, but also as a confidant, not feeling comfortable enough to share with the parents of this child who she's working with on a regular basis, and sharing with this child, we can send it back to the bucket, trying to help this child get through a tough time in his life, but knowing still her role as a teacher and as a confidant, as someone who would really make a difference to folks, patients later in their lives, mental illness patients. You take that great quote from Ruth Faison Shaw, we can send it back to the bucket, regarding the monster, and this great quote from Bryan Carey in the piece, the Our State piece there in March of 2007. There's no question that her work had an enormous impact on art, education, and medicine, Carey says, and finger painting is just plain fun to boot. Shaw believed that every painting has a beauty spot. It's up to the teacher to help you find it. The beauty spot is inside you. Take the time to go online, fingerpainting.org, fingerpainting.org, or pick up the phone, 919-475-1355. Bryan Carey, the Shaw School and Studio, right there in Durham, North Carolina.